welcome back to Zionist Talks, a series with JNF USA and the Jerusalem Post. My name is Corrine Baum, and I'm a breaking news desk editor at the Jerusalem Post. Today, I'm here with Reverend Johnnie Moore. Hi, how's it going?
Good. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So I'm just going to jump right in and get to my first question. Your advocacy for the land and the people of Israel are really passionate. It's been very influential. Could you share some more personal experiences that have, I guess, ignited this deep-rooted connection?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is, and this may sound crazy to some of the people listening to us, but as a Christian growing up in the deep South in the United States, to my knowledge, I never met anyone who was Jewish until I was an adult. And yet, in my small churches in the southern part of the United States, we were taught, almost from the time we were taught anything at all, that as Christians, one of our obligations is to love Israel and to love the Jewish people. It's like caught, it's part of our culture. And I would say it's part of evangelical culture all over the world. There's 70 to 80 million evangelicals in America. There's 700 to 800 million evangelicals around the world. And yet, I think a lot of evangelicals end up with what I call a sentimental relationship, with Israel, with the Jewish community, with Zionism. They don't quite understand it, but they believe it. For me, I would say I had a few consequential experiences in my life that deepened that understanding, and most of them related to mentors. I was doing good, around the world. And I heard from a rabbi who complimented my work, and I got to know that rabbi. And one time I said something that was borderline offensive. I had no idea what I was saying because I knew nothing about it. And I had this rabbi who sort of gently, opened my eyes, to the history of something, that I had said. And then I just got super, super curious about all of these things. And I started reading Jewish texts. Another mentor of mine one time gave me a copy of the Chofetz Chaim, which I'm not sure was a compliment. he gave it to me, and it changed my life in many ways, because I was reading teaching that came from the Hebrew Bible, which I called the Old Testament my entire life, but it was the first time I really recognized it was the Hebrew Bible. And then I started studying the weekly portion with a rabbi, and so I had all of these different experiences in my life. And more recently, in the last couple of years, I've become a real student of Zionism. When I discovered that Theodor Herzl invited Christian friends of his to attend the first Zionist World Congress, it was a famous Christian friend of his that first introduced him to influential figures in Europe. So there are so many experiences of the way Jewish culture and Jewish teaching and Jewish ideas have been integrated in my own Christian experience.
That's so interesting to hear. I actually personally didn't really know that about evangelical culture at all. I'm also from the South, and for us, it's, as Jews in the South, it can look a little bit different. So it's something I hadn't even realized, and I'm from the same area of the U.S. that you are. So that's super interesting.
People live in parallel lives, and that's actually part of the problem. We need to introduce pastors and rabbis. We need to introduce, a lot of times we send our kids to public school, but a lot of Christians send their kids to Christian schools, and Jewish families send their kids to Jewish schools. They should know one another. They have a shared commitment to private education, because of similar reasons. And, but we have a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. So getting on to my second question. You've been recognized with the Simon Wiesenthal Center's Medal of Valor for your dedication to Israel. Congratulations. How has this acknowledgement impacted your mission and your approach to Zionist advocacy?
I mean, that was another transformative moment of my life. I mean, I wasn't seeking any award. In this case, it was this happened I guess about 10 years ago now. I was trying to rescue Christians from ISIS in Iraq and Syria, and we we tried to, and successfully actually evacuated them. I chartered an airplane. I negotiated with a whole team of people their citizenship in a European country. Then we resettled a lot of people. Like I was just doing it because I cared, and I had an amazing boss at the time who gave me a little bit of time to work on this because he cared about it as well. And so, I just dropped in northern Iraq, and it was not for me to decide whether people should stay or go, but I had a fundamental conviction that if people were unsafe, they deserve to be able to stay in safety and dignity, or they deserve to be able to leave safely and lawfully. And so I was helping with all this stuff, and then one day I just get a call out of the blue, and these Jewish leaders had noticed my work. And then, by the way, it wasn't just the award. It's that those rabbis at the Simon Wiesenthal Center, Rabbi Heyer and Rabbi Cooper and Rabbi Adlerstein, they've become mentors of mine. I mean, I talked to Rabbi Cooper multiple times a week for more than a year. I studied the Bible every week with Rabbi Adlerstein. Rabbi Heyer, I had the privilege of making the phone call to him when he was invited to pray at a presidential inauguration. And then Rabbi Cooper and I have had a lot of consequential experiences around the world, where we invited a delegation from Bahrain 2 years before the Abraham Accords to visit Jerusalem. We hosted them in Jerusalem. Most recently, Rabbi Cooper and I met with the Syrian foreign minister in New York City. The crazy experience. We wrote a book together on the suffering of Christians in Nigeria called The Next Jihad. So the award was like a big deal. It's fine. In fact, I didn't even realize how big a deal it was. The other recipient was like Shimon Peres, posthumously, and it was like everybody in Hollywood was in the crowd. Like it was a crazy, surreal experience. But these honors pass. It's like what you do with it. And the great gift of that award is I met so many amazing, interesting people, and rabbis that I collaborate with like literally every day around the world. And that was like the door that opened for me to get to know so many people in the Jewish community. And you can take the thread of that experience all the way to even my relationship with JNF, my relationship with synagogues all over the world, with the ADL, with like all kinds of different organizations. It all really happened because a few rabbis noticed a Christian and that was doing something that they liked, and they reached out to me, and they they it's not about the honor, it's about the relationship. And by the way, I'm like this evangelical Christian kid. I know not that much of a kid. I guess I was 30 or so, but there were so many things I just didn't know, and I'm sure I've said crazy stuff sometimes, and I'm sure I was but they also like it's interesting that there are times as an advocate for human rights, for religious freedom, for helping people. Sometimes it gets exhausting. Sometimes you want to give up. Sometimes you're fighting with politicians. All these things are really, really difficult sometimes. And I remember one really, really difficult day. I was just fed up with all of it, and I just didn't think I could go on anymore. Like it was just too much, and I wasn't succeeding, and I feel like I was being misunderstood, and I was in the middle of a political fight I didn't choose, and I picked up the phone and I called Rabbi Cooper, and I'm done with this. And Rabbi Cooper quoted to me from Ethics of Our Fathers. It's not up to us to complete the task, but neither are we free to desist from it. And it's amazing how that simple phrase, that I didn't have to have the whole weight of the world on my shoulders. I just had to do my part, and I could keep doing my part like every single day. And so, I mean that honor was a great honor, but it's everything that came from that really changed my life and created a lot of collaboration around the world for a lot of people in need, the Jewish community, the persecuted Christian community, lots of others.
That's absolutely incredible how this, like, you've just been able to build these really, it sounds like transformative relationships with not only like Jewish spiritual leaders, but like just all around the world. It's very, very impressive to hear. So my third question, having played a pivotal role in the Bahrain Declaration on Religious Freedom and Peaceful Coexistence, like you kind of mentioned in your last answer, how do you envision such interfaith initiatives influencing the future of Israel and its neighboring countries?
I always say that people make peace before politicians make peace. People to people peace always precedes political peace. And unfortunately, in the Middle East and in the United States, a lot of countries, we think that religion only plays a destructive role, right? Because that's what gets the headlines when when a terrorist defames their religion to try to kill someone, or when people use religion as a tool for power, or in the case of the Islamic Republic of Iran, where a handful of mullahs hijacked an entire country in the name of religion and create constant chaos and innumerable inhumane decisions on the basis of religion. So religion has a bad name in the world. And yet, the vast majority of religious people around the world are not that. The vast majority of religious people around the world are just like, their faith is like an infrastructure for their lives, and there are a lot of shared values. And very often failed or failing states, religious leaders are the only leaders that have any moral authority. And the religious network around the world is incredibly powerful. There's not a country in the world where I'm not 2 or 3 degrees separated from whatever problem I'm interested in because of the evangelical community, because we're everywhere. There are more evangelicals in China than there are members of the Communist Party. Okay, in Brazil, which is long this Catholic country, it's now majority evangelical. The evangelicals everywhere, all over the world. And I just have this fundamental conviction that religion is actually part of the solution, not part of the problem. And very, very often around the world, I can engage in a religious context when politicians can't talk to one another. In the middle of this war, I won't say the country, but there's a country that doesn't have normal relations with Israel. I would say it's on and off hostile towards Israel, and yet I'm a Christian Zionist. Everybody knows I'm a Zionist. Everybody knows I'm close to Israel. But I built a really, really strong relationship with the religious leaders of this country, not on the basis of politics or geopolitical disagreements, but on the basis of shared values, And so I actually think that we have invested too little time in the religious aspect of our geopolitics. I mean, I wrote my PhD dissertation on religious track 2 diplomacy, so the non-governmental role of religious actors in diplomacy around the world. Yet there's almost no research on the intersection of religion in anything, peacemaking and security. And comparatively speaking, there's some, but this is a totally underutilized, understudied topic. And even if you look at the current war, I mean, you study the Oslo Accords. There was a decision that was made in the Oslo process to intentionally exclude religion from the equation. They were going to deal with it later. It was an intentional decision that was made by the negotiators. This is the only in the long list of initial terms of agreement in the Oslo process. There was one line on religion, and it was that holy sites would be used as a type of polling place, which was kind of weird anyhow. To immediately politicize and it was just like I can understand the rationale. This is too thorny and too complicated. Let's make peace and we'll deal with this later. But what is the one thing that blew up on the Oslo Accords within the first couple of years? We have Hamas comes on the scene. We have, religious opposition to the peace process on the other side. Because we didn't deal with religion will be dealt with. And I think we should be much more proactive when it comes to religion. And by the way, the world's getting more religious. I know would surprise some people listening to us, but and I won't bore everyone with the statistics, but every way you measure it, the world is getting more religious, not less religious. Even, by the way, in a country like France, where church attendance is at a historic, there were historic baptisms. I'm not Catholic, but in the Catholic Church at Easter this year, everywhere all around the world, religion's on the ascendancy. And yet we don't pay a lot of attention to it. So I pay attention to it, and I found it to be really helpful.
That's actually really interesting. I hadn't thought about the role, like the peacemaking role that religious leaders and religion can play when we are negotiating things that can seem a little bit thorny, like you said, like more difficult. And that's something that I think will definitely give our audience something to think about.
And also when it comes to Zionism, if the relationship between evangelicals in Israel or the Jewish community is going to be on the basis of politics alone, then, you know, it's going to be much more fragile than if it's on the basis of shared values. Evangelicals like me need to stop viewing our Old Testament as the Old Testament. We need to understand it's the Hebrew Bible, okay? And Judaism and Christianity are separate religions, but we wouldn't have one without the other. And everything, every idea, every person that's important to us, you know, as Christians that gave us this gift that we cherish was Jewish. And we have to understand this and have these shared values because otherwise, you know, the fragility of our relationship can ebb and flow based upon the geopolitics of our time. If it's united at the level of values, which is where it was united in early Zionism between
Mhm.
people like, you know, Heckler and Herzl himself, then it's a different ballgame.
Completely different ballgame. I see your point. So, going off of that, how do you assess the current state of Zionism and its impact today?
Well, I mean, Zionism has become the front lines of anti-Semitism, and I believe anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. I mean, while we're talking, you know, I'm in Washington D.C. You know, on 3 days ago, 4 days ago, I was at the Israeli embassy as a guest for a staff memorial service for two Israeli diplomats who were murdered by a terrorist, a left-wing Marxist terrorist, in our nation's capital. We haven't had a diplomat killed in the United States in a generation. There hasn't been an Israeli diplomat killed anywhere in the world in a generation. And why were they killed? They were killed because of their support for Israel. This was anti-Zionism that motivated his anti-Semitism. And what happened to them was absolutely horrific. I mean, about to get engaged. Apparently, you know, she was an American. He actually was an evangelical Christian. I mean, this has become the front lines of not only the battle for Zionism. It's become the front lines of fortifying all of our Western values. And I hate the word Western values because they're actually not Western values. They're Judeo-Christian values that may have built the foundation for the West, but they preceded the West. They came from the land of Israel. They came from the book, the Bible. And so Zionism, you know, not only is, you know, a fascinating subject for us to study about our shared history. It's not only the foundation of the modern state of Israel, but with its roots all the way back to Abraham, you know, arriving in modern Be'er Sheva. But this has become the front lines of our fight against hate, you know, around the world. And you know, a few years ago in the United States, before October 7th, there was online. There was this website that came up. It was termed the Mapping Project. It was linked to the Islamic Republic of Iran, where, in effect, there were around Boston, there were Jewish Zionist sites that were listed basically as targets for nefarious actors, not just protesters, but violent actors. And I think it's telling that while the majority of those sites on that mapping project were Jewish schools, Jewish day schools, and synagogues and other Jewish institutions, on that mapping project they also included churches that were Zionist. And so you know, while Christians were guests of Herzl in the first Zionist World Congress, um, it's taken us too long for the relationship between Jews and Christians to become more substantive. And and now we're fighting a common battle for everything that we cherish in the world. They tried to disguise anti-Semitism as a type of anti-Zionism. We know better, but we're still a little behind in terms of fighting this fight together. It's a fight for everything that we care about in the world, and we don't fight violently. We have to fight with ideas. We have to fight with educating our children, with raising another generation. We have to fight at the polling place and the ballot box, you know, and we have to recognize that there are some violent extremists on the other side that would kill me today as a Christian supporter of Israel in an act of anti-Semitism. Not because I'm Jewish, but because I live my life to stand up for the Jewish community, to fight anti-Semitism, because anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism.
Looking ahead, how do you see your community and your vision coming to life at the Jewish National Fund USA's World Zionist Village, which is set to be complete in 2028, I have heard?
I cannot wait to take groups of Christians to Be'er Sheva, to the World Zionist Village. I mean, I'm part of my deepening relationship with Israel and the Jewish community has been my own like deep dive into Zionism. In fact, on my desk now, as a hobby, I've been reading Theodor Herzl's diaries, and this is the most interesting one. For me, it's three volumes, but the second volume recounts his relationship with Heckler. Heckler was like this quixotic reverend who literally introduced Theodor Herzl to the first person that introduced him to anyone of political prominence in his Zionist movement was this reverend. And by the way, the reverend said some crazy things. Herzl wasn't quite sure about the reverend. There was and yet no one is mentioned in his diary almost as much as Heckler's, who's listed more than 150 times in his diary. And yet this is like a lost piece of history. And I think most Jewish scholars of Herzl, of Zionism, don't know this. But there's so many things to learn, and I think, of course, there's no better place than Be'er Sheva because in our Bible we call it Be'er Sheva, and
where Abraham settled.
It's where Abraham settled, yeah, and it's an amazing story. I mean, Abraham's this like rich guy in this big city, and God calls him to go to the middle of the desert and just live in a tent for the rest of his life in the Promised Land, and unfortunately, too few Christians, as it is, when they visit Israel, go there at all. And I think this is going to be not only a significant site for the Christian tourists that go to Israel on pilgrimage, though I'm like so beyond the tourism. I want millions of tourists, but I want Christians to like do their college degree in Israel. I want Christians to vacation in Israel. I want Christians to spend a portion of their life in Israel. And no one, if they go to Israel one time, or if they go to Israel like 6 or 7 times this year, like me, no one should go to Israel and not at least once in their life go to this place on that site, because this is the beginning of everything for all of us. It is the root of Zionism, when this man Abraham, on faith alone, because God called him to go, went to this place in the middle of the desert, and you can visit the very site. And it's an incredible experience. And now, finally, there'll be this educational convening institution around it where we can give it the attention that it deserves.
That's super interesting. Wow. If I'm honest, I kind of just learned that Abraham settled in Be'er Sheva. I fear I need to do some more reading. I probably should go to temple more, but that's okay. We'll figure that out later. All right. So my final question for you is, many people outside of the Jewish community may not feel as deeply connected as you are to Zionism in Israel. Many people inside the Jewish community might not even feel the same connection. What is it about Israel and its history, or its mission, I guess, that resonates with you personally? And why do you think others aren't as committed as you are?
I'll give a rational answer, and I'll give an irrational answer. Okay.
Fair enough.
The rational answer is, I can summarize it in a sentence. Your book is our book. Your heroes are our heroes. And we may misinterpret them or interpret them differently sometimes, but your values are our values. And so everything that matters to me in the world is somehow a gift from the Jewish community. And it took me a while to discover that in my life. And I think a lot of Christians are sort of discovering it now. And in the way I see a lot of my young Jewish friends, like after October 7th, sort of awakening to this is a fight for their generation, not just a fight for their parents or their grandparents' generation. I think a lot of evangelicals in my generation, millennials and younger, we've had a similar experience, and yet it's drawing us to not just political advocacy, say, for Israel, but it's drawing us to a deeper understanding of our shared history. And so your book is our book, your heroes are our heroes, your values are our values. The irrational part of it is the first time I visited Israel and I walked out of the airport, I felt something. I don't know how to describe it. I feel it every time I'm there. When I stay in Jerusalem, I have a habit is if I can, however late I finish my day. Last week, I finished my day at like almost midnight. And my last meeting, I was in town for like 36 hours. And I walked from my hotel in Jerusalem to the wall. And I put in three prayers, a prayer for the release of the hostages, a prayer for my family, and a prayer for general peace in the region. And also, I think evangelicals, there are parts of the evangelical story in the Middle East that have contributed to positive developments in the region that evangelicals don't even understand. Like when the Abraham Accords happened with Bahrain and the UAE, I think a lot of not only the Jewish community, a lot of evangelicals are surprised to discover that the first hospitals in both of those countries were started by evangelical doctors who went to those countries. The leader of the UAE and many members of the royal family were born in that first hospital. They were cared for by evangelical doctors who sacrificed their life and livelihood to travel to a faraway land before anybody had discovered oil, for instance, in the UAE, to just serve people. And so, yeah, I think this is actually not the beginning of a new era of conflict in the region. I think it's a moment of conflict in an era of peace. And part of that story of peace will be a deepening relationship between the Jewish and Christian communities as proud Christians and as proud Jews. We're not trying to bring anything together, but there's a lot we can learn from one another.
Absolutely. I totally agree. There's a lot to be learned and a lot to do. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in to this episode of Zionist Talks. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.